Hey, what's going on out there, everybody? I'd like to welcome you all to a brand new episode of the Boombox Guru. I'm your host, LB. So, for today's episode, I'm going to be talking about my top five Machine Head albums. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar who Machine Head is, they are actually a heavy metal band from Oakland, California. They were formed by lead vocalist, guitarist, songwriter Robb Flynn. He had previously exited his previous band, which was Violence, legendary Bay Area thrash metal band, also from Oakland. He had left that band. He actually had formed uh, Machine Head as a side project while he was still in that, while he was still in Violence. There's actually a really interesting story behind how he ended up leaving Violence and focusing on Machine Head full time. It has to do with the members of Machine Head getting into a fight with a gang after they left the Deftones show back in the early '90s. But really interesting. If you can find some interviews where he talks about and goes in depth on that situation, definitely check it out. Matter of fact, if you are familiar with his podcast, No Effing Regrets, there's a interview that he did with Brian Head Welch from Korn, where in their discussion, he actually goes into great detail behind that whole situation. But anyway, he forms the band. They released a few demos in the early '90s, and they finally get signed to Roadrunner Records. Now, Machine Head is typically described as a groove metal band and thrash metal, but throughout the years, they went through different directions musically. There was a period where they went through a new metal phase, and there was also a period where they reverted back to the more groove metal, thrash metal style, but they also implemented other like heavy metal elements into their sound as well. But I want to get into these five top albums, and these are the top albums that I listen to on a regular basis. They're usually my go-tos when I'm on a Machine Head kick. So let's start with the first album, Burn My Eyes, released in 1994. This is the band's debut album, released on Roadrunner Records. And this album was actually Roadrunner Records' best-selling album up until Slipknot's debut record that came out in '99. But this album shipped over 400,000 copies. And what a great record. What a great debut it was. You know, they had hits with Davidian and Old, which were mainstays on MTV, Headbangers Ball. But I feel that with this album, Burn My Eyes, Machine Head took that Pantera groove style and they just made it somewhat more heavier and darker. Cause this record is really, it's really dark. It's really angry. There's a lot of songs that go into like social commentary uh, factors. You know what I'm saying? He talking about the state of the nation and stuff like that. Uh, the one of the biggest hits from the song, Davidian, is actually about the Waco siege that happened around this time, with David Koresh. There's also a song on here called Real Eyes, Real Eyes, Real Eyes that talk about the Los Angeles riots that were happening back in the early '90s. Then you have songs such as I'm Your God Now, which talks about substance abuse and things of that nature. A lot of great songs, a lot of heavy, deep subject matter. Uh, just a really aggressive record, very slow. I think they really slowed things down too when it comes to those like really groovy breakdowns and so forth, man. But a really good debut album, man. I think they really knocked it out. Most people consider this to be their best album. I would consider it to be one of their best albums. I don't know if I would chalk it up as the best Machine Head record. I think there's a few albums later on that you could really put in that category as well, man. But I really enjoy listening to this record, man. It's definitely a record that helped to pioneer the new wave of American heavy metal. And I think it inspired a lot of other modern metal bands that came up behind it as well, man. So definitely check out Burn My Eyes. One of their most accessible records, man. I see this album a lot in record stores, man. So if you come across it, definitely pick it up. All right, so the next album we're gonna talk about is the second album from Machine Head, called "The More Things Change," released in 1997. And this record, shoot, man, they got even heavier and even angrier on this record, man. I think that this album is more of a representation of groove metal because the first record, while it does have those groove metal elements, they still are more along like the thrash metal style of playing. I think most people used to call it like neo thrash or post thrash at that point. I don't think groove metal had necessarily gotten a name just yet, but I think that the More Things Change is more representative of that style. Still has some thrash metal elements in songs like Struck a Nerve, and a few songs have those tempos, those rhythms, but for the most part, they really slow things down. Very slow and heavy, dissonant grooves, very droggy at times. It really helps to invoke that kind of darker and aggressive like emotion that the band is displaying on this record, man. And Rob also utilized a bit more of his clean vocals on here. He's still being harsh. He's still using his harsh approach as well, but he also implements his clean singing, which I think Rob is a really good singer. I think he's a pretty good singer, in my personal opinion. But just a really great songs on here. Some of my favorites on here is probably "Take My Scars," "Struck a Nerve," "Down to None," "The Front Lines," "Violate." Just an all around solid record, man. I just really enjoy this record, man. I didn't when I first got into Machine Head, I didn't think they could get heavier than Burn My Eyes, but they did with this record, man. I mean, they really got heavy with those deep and just eerie, haunting grooves and so forth, man. Great album, man. One of my favorites. I actually like this album a bit more than I do Burn My Eyes. So this is actually one of my favorite I said Meshuggah, Machine Head albums, man. I listen to this quite often when I'm on the kick, man. But definitely check out the More Things Change. Awesome follow up to Burn My Eyes. All right, so the next album, and this is probably going to be controversial because I know when this record initially came out, got a lot of hate. People really didn't like it, but hey, it's my top 5, so I'm going to head and talk about it. The Burning Red, released in 1999. So this is Machine Head's new metal album. Basically, it's their new metal album. They went, I guess you could say, almost full fledged into new metal. They still retain the groove metal elements, but yeah, it's definitely got more of a new metal vibe to it. And I'm not sure who produced this record. I don't know if Ross Robinson produced this album. Can't really see the credits. I'm not sure who produced this record. I don't know if it was Ross Robinson that produced this. I don't think it was. It might have been Colin Richardson. I'm not sure. But anyway, they go for that new metal style. You know, at this time, 1999, this is one of the peak years of new metal. There were a lot of bands that were kind of, transitioning their sound to new metal, or they were creeping those new metal elements into their sound. You know, you heard in the Slayer's album, Diabolus and Musica. I guess you could say Anthrax were kind of implementing that stuff in their sound a little bit around this time. There was a lot of bands who were kind of shifting their sound towards that, and Machine Head was one of them. But just because it's new metal does not mean this is a terrible record. I actually enjoy this album. This is probably my favorite Machine Head album. I really listen to this album quite a bit. I like it. I mean, at the end of the day, I grew up during the whole new metal era when Korn and Limp Bizkit and all those bands were really on top. So my opinion about this album may be a little bit biased. I maybe have a little bit more of a, what's the word I'm trying to look for? I can give this album the benefit of the doubt because it was of those times, man. But it's a great record. You know, a lot of great songs on here. A lot of great songs on this record. I mean, some of my favorites on here would have to be Desire to Fire, The Blood, The Sweat, The Tears, Silver, From This Day. Let's see, Exhale the Vow. And where's my Message in a Bottle, which is a cover of the Police song of the same name. Listen, if you don't like anything else from this album, I definitely think you should check out that cover because, man, Machine Head killed it on that cover, man. I mean, they did such a wonderful job covering the Police. But they really did such a great job on covering that song. But this album has a lot of great songs on it. It's a lot of great songwriting. And I think the biggest backlash was more so on the image that the band had around this time as opposed to the music, because they did go for that whole new metal image. I mean, Rob had cut his hair and he was rocking blonde, dyed it blonde, was rocking spiked hair. They were wearing Adidas suits and stuff like that, and baggy Jinko jeans with the wallet chains and stuff like that. One of the guitarists in the band, he had dreadlocks and so forth. And Rob also, he started to implement rapping into the music on here as well. Now, as far as rapping goes, the rapping isn't on every song on the album. I think there might be 2 or 3 songs on the album where Rob raps. And I mean, I'm not going to say he's like Nas or Jay-Z when it comes to rapping, but the stuff that he's saying it's not corny raps. It's nothing that's terrible. And most of you probably might not even know that Robb Flynn is actually a big hip hop fan as well. Actually, I saw an interview that he did on Much Music around this time where he was riding around listening to Nas. But it's not his rapping isn't terrible on here either. It's not corny Fred Durst type of raps. You know what I mean? It's actually pretty good, man. The songwriting on here is really good. A lot more emotion on this record, a lot more personal things as opposed to the more social commentary nature on the previous records. There's one song here called Five, which Robb Flynn discusses a time where he was like molested by a friend, an older friend of the family, or he was molested by an adult in his childhood, and that's what that song is about. A song he really doesn't perform live or sing anymore because it's such a personal and traumatic experience for him. But yeah, he gets really personal on here, man. He implements a lot of his clean vocals on this record as well, which is good because I really enjoy hearing Robb Flynn sing because he's a really great singer. And it also has kind of like an alternative kind of grungy vibe in some places as well. But I really enjoy this record, man. I could go on and on about The Burning Red. I think it's a very underrated album, but I also think it's one of the best new metal albums to come out during that period. So forget the reviews that the elitists say about this record, calling it a terrible record. It's not a terrible album. Just because it's new metal doesn't mean it is bad. Definitely check out this album at your own with your own opinion in mind. You know, don't let somebody else's opinion, not even mine, but I'm just telling you, don't let the elitist metal sites deter you from listening to this album. It's really good. So definitely check it out if you come across it. All right, so the next album I want to talk about is Until the Locust, released in 2011. Really good album. Really good album. This was around the time when Machine Head had really started coming back to form, you know, after Supercharger, which was considered to be their worst album. You know, they came back with Through the Ashes of Empire, which was them heading back towards their form. Then they dropped The Blackening, which took them to the next level. That I think The Blackening is probably one of their most acclaimed albums. I think it's the one that really like got them out there more as far as like maybe slightly mainstream. But they followed it up with Unto the Locust, man, and this is a really awesome album. They revert back to the groove metal, thrash metal style. Although I would say that this album is more along thrash metal than groove. There are a few breakdowns on the album that harken back to those groove metal, syncopated riffs and those slow, druggy type styles of playing that you get in groove metal. But for the most part, I think this is a thrash metal album. But interesting enough, Machine Head actually, they take thrash and groove metal and they manage to kind of blend it with other metal styles. Listening to this record, the guitar tones, the solos kind of remind me of melodic death metal. And there's even some moments on here that kind of remind me of old school speed metal and even old school power metal. One song in particular, the last song on the album called Who We Are, which is an anthem, has a very like kind of old school power metal feel to it. Within the drumming, within the sound, within the anthemic chorus and everything like that. It really has that. Locust, really good song. Has a bit of a kind of a somewhat like a melodic death metal vibe to it. I Am Hell, the track that kicks off the album. Another one that has that melodic death metal type vibe. This Is the End has somewhat of a speed metal, old school speed metal type style to it. Really interesting how they were able to blend those styles onto this record, man. And they really turned out one of their best albums. Until the Locust is really good. You know, 5-star album in my opinion, man. I really dig this record. They did such a good job at taking thrash and groove metal and making it more interesting by implementing those other type of metal styles, man. So definitely, if you haven't heard this record, definitely go check it out because it's definitely one of their best ones. And this album received a lot of critical acclaim upon its release. People consider it one of their best albums of all time. So definitely check this one out. And hold on a minute, it's gonna take me a swig of water. All right. So for my last album, I decided to go with Bloodstone and Diamonds, released in 2014. On I think this was their first one on Nuclear Blast. All the other records were released on Roadrunner Records. Yeah, another really good album. Very great. Personally, my opinion, I consider this to be Machine Head's melodic death metal album. Very progressive in a lot of points. Excuse me, a lot of parts. They even have like this like kind of orchestral background on a lot of the songs that really help fill the songs out, give it more of a foundation. But there's just a lot of really good like melodies and passion that's invoked into the performances on here, man. Very very melodic death metal influence, man. Like this album sounds like Robb Flynn was listening to a lot of the Gothenburg metal scene, because there's a lot of songs on this record that actually remind me a lot of like a Monomorph, or maybe Hard Work Carcass, even though Carcass is not from Gothenburg, they're from England. But one song in particular called In Comes the Flood. Go check out that song, because honestly, that track sounds like it could have fitted perfectly on like an Monomorph album. It has that vibe, man. But the rhythms, the tempos, the guitar tones, the solos, all those melodies and everything, very reminiscent of the Gothenburg Swedish metal scene. So to me, this is, I know it's categorized as thrash metal and groove metal, which those elements are there on certain parts of on certain songs. You know, on certain breakdowns, you get those grooves, you get those thrashy tempos, but for the most part, this album is really like melodic death metal. And even look at the cover. Look at the cover, for instance, man. You can't. The cover even has kind of like that kind of Viking, kind of pirate seal type approach to it, and that's the kind of vibe that's all through the record, man. It's like it kind of has like a sort of an adventurous vibe to it, especially with those orchestral sounds in the background of a lot of the songs. But yeah, essentially to me, man, this is Machine Head's melodic death metal album. But honestly, it's a really great album. I think it's one of their best albums. It's one of my personal favorites that I usually go to whenever I want to listen to Machine Head, because it's just a great record. And not only that, man, I also got a little bit of hints of Gojira in some of the rhythms on certain songs. But just an all-out really great record, man, that I enjoy. Definitely one that you should, definitely one that you should check out. It did receive universal acclaim. Like a lot of people consider this to be a really awesome record, man, and I have to agree with them, man. It's awesome, man. So many good, so much great songwriting on this record, man. You know, Machine Head was really on one at this point, man. But unfortunately, you know, they followed it up with a dud called Catharsis. But that's for another video, another time. But yes, that right there, that is my top 5 Machine Head albums. I hope you guys all enjoyed this particular video. For anybody that may not be all that familiar with Machine Head, or maybe like a novice listener, I hope this video will influence you to maybe go check out and dig deeper into their discography. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. And if you can do me a favor, hit that thumbs up. Give me a like. Helps give my videos more exposure. Also, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the bell. That way you'll be notified when I drop new content. Check out all my other videos. I have more top 5 videos, album reviews, tier lists, rankings, discography breakdowns. Whatever you want to look for, check it out on my channel. Share it with people who you think might be interested. Follow me on my social media platforms, which I have links to in my description. And as always, I hope every one of you out there has a blessed day, a blessed week, and love, peace, and music. Peace out.